We're going to have George now. So George Neil is the manager of the Magpie Community House in Upwey. He's been running very different workshops and many different topics for a long time. He's also a experienced yoga teacher. And so also he's been doing these 5G talks as well. Thank you so much, George, for promoting this event as well, and to be able to talk here about what can we do as a community. So just give a round of applause to George.
Well, after hearing the two first presenters, great presentations, you've convinced me I'm going bush. I might be more serious than what you think. We do have
a microphone, George.
Yeah, you can hear me okay? We do have a radiation refuge, possibly at an advanced stage, and you're giving you're signing up the sheet here, so we know who you are, and if we can get some interest together, maybe that's where it can go. All right, I'll just grab my notes. You've got one of these on, most of you have got one of these already. On the lower half there, we've got a foundation law event, which is happening this Friday. So even though I'm an electronics engineer, I'm going to cover some of the lawful stuff that we've been doing in this area. Right? Where are my notes? Okay, so my name is George Neo, and there might be some correlation to the 1999 movie, The Matrix, which told us at last that reality is not what it seems. And however, the illusions are much deeper than what we think. Let's go on to the slides. Okay, that's not the right application. Okay, they said thalidomide was safe, they said cigarettes were safe, asbestos, mercury, DDT, glyphosate. They said 5G is safe now, and does anyone believe them? Yeah, we're not too sure about that. So we live in a world of illusions, and coming from yoga and metaphysics now, the illusion is far deeper than what people think. Now, hands up if you've ever had anything unexplainable in normal terms happening in your life. Nearly everybody. Okay, I rest my case. Okay, we live in a metaphysical universe, higher dimensions. And there's different ways to stop the internal dialogue. You can use psychedelics, but we don't recommend that. And it damages the psyche and the body, according to the shamans, unless you know what you're doing. So that's why we promote yoga and magical passes, which is an ancient Mexican shaman practice. This slide here is quoting Martin Luther King Jr. And what he says is that those who love peace must be as organised as those who love war. And what I've observed, we've been running the centre in Upwey for nearly 15 years, what I've observed is those who love war are very organised. Yeah? Those who love peace are very disorganised, and there's lots of egos involved. But it's great to see this turnout. Now, where were you 5 or 6 years ago when we started this smart meter thing? We put a lot of work into that. And I'll see what I can cover with that. We're individually and collectively creating our reality, and the collective is so powerful, and we need to get to critical mass. We don't have to convince 50% or more of the population. We only need a small percentage, and that will then sweep through the population, because the consciousness of an awakened being can balance out the consciousness of 100,000, 200,000 beings that are not awake. So you don't need, a high percentage of the people starting to look at this and say, is this a good idea? I don't think so. We love to blame government for these illusions, as we saw before. Governments, this is a quote from one of the Telos books, if anybody's familiar with those. Governments, corrupt to the core, always reflect to the consciousness of the people. Collective higher integrity no longer attracts corruption. Right? So when we complain about our governments, we put them there. The collective put them there. And so that's why we need an elevation of consciousness to get to the point where we attract better governments. Right? We're not saying do away with governments, but we're saying we need to attract better quality government. I've got some bad news and good news about all this. And the bad news is it's the end of the world as we know it. Right? Now the good news, it's the end of the world as we know it. Right? So what we're saying here, it depends on how you see it. If you want it to be bad news, it can be bad news. You can get stuck in the quagmire of trying to defeat something which is already broken. That's the way I put it. It's already broken, and you won't be able to fix it in some way, right? And so, put your energy into something positive rather than negative, and make the old system redundant. That's the advice. Now, if I go back to previous.
You can move the mic stand, George.
That's how we were promoting the 5G Apocalypse movie. Most of you have seen that? Yeah. And it was actually, the movie is actually called 5G Apocalypse Extinction Event. So I wanted to make it a little bit more positive. I threw away the extinction and left the apocalypse. And guess what? Apocalypse does not mean catastrophe. Apocalypse means revealing. Right? In the Greek, in the Bible, that's the word for revelation. Right? And so I'm actually putting it forward as a catalyst to wake up humanity. I'm almost saying bring it on. Right? Because when the smart meter came along, there wasn't enough for us to do anything about it. But now we're seeing a lot of interest, fortunately. And so we can see where it goes. Yeah, it's unveiling of the truth or disclosure or revelation. And what's creating this greater interest is when we have our backs to the wall, facing a scenario so terrible, we can finally get ourselves collectively organised with love, compassion and respect for our fellow humans and for life, instead of ego and domination that has ruled our lives for so long. Just going back a little bit further as part of my journey, if you've got any rotten eggs, you might want to throw them at me, because I am an electronics engineer, and in the 70s, in my final year project, I was designing one of the world's first electronic meters, right?
Ah, I got an edge.
They even paid me to work on it, my final year project.
Sure.
Right? And in the 80s, I was part of small teams working on the world's first cellular phone technology.
Ah,
And that was happening in CFIT, CTEC and CPAC, the companies. It was exciting work, I can tell you, but when I look back, and when I do look back, in the 90s now, I was also working on electronic gear and packaging it in such a way that the radiation doesn't get out of the box. Now that's quite an art, right? And if there's anyone has had any experience on trying to keep the radiation out of their home, it's quite complex, right? The idea is to, you've got electronics in the box, and the signals are flying around close to the speed of light. And back in the 90s, the signals were getting down to the 1 nanosecond range. That's pretty fast. We talk about 1 gigahertz there. And they sneak out of the box if you don't design it properly. If you don't have adequate shielding here and there, and your cables adequately bypassed. And we used to have to take the equipment to the RF labs, which was in Bayswater at the time, and test them to make sure the radiation wasn't getting out. But that was quite stringent. You had to put a lot of work, a lot of knowledge behind trying to keep that radiation in. A long way from there, when we got involved with the smart meter, I rang up the RF labs, and they shipped it to Tullamarine, and I spoke to the guy that was testing our equipment all those years ago, and he invited me to the labs, and I had a guided tour of all the equipment and all the setups they had there. So he took me to the room where the head, where they test the radiation levels. Right? It's a dummy head filled with water, and the test is 6 minutes to see whether it rises 1 degree. And that's the only safety test they do on that radiation. There's no aspect of DNA damage or anything like that. And, I was very appreciative of coming into contact with this guy again, and he showed me his smart meter report, which I got from another source anyway. And he was the main engineer, and the smart meter report gave the smart meter a clean bill of health. But on the first page of that smart meter report, it was engineer checked, which was him, approved, checked, and there's a third one. Anyway, all those 3 categories were ticked by the same person. Right? And that doesn't make sense. In the engineering world, it always has to be peer-reviewed. And so that was one of the main questions I asked him. We video interviewed him, and I still got the interview, a high-quality interview, of him answering those questions. And I said, well, in the engineering world, you can't approve what you designed. That's impossible. And there were 3 levels, which he engineer checked, approved, and something else, whatever. So that was bizarre. Let's move on with the slides. Oh yeah, that's the Foundation Law event, 7 to 9 p.m. Friday, 28th of June in Thomas. 10 minutes of that is on YouTube if you want to watch it to see what it's about. And it's a radically different approach where you go into peace instead of confrontation, and it changes the effect. Right? If you're getting harassed by someone, or even through paperwork, you go into peace and you act innocent. I think that's the basis of it. And it's being pioneered by a small group of guys in the hills, and you'd probably be worth knowing more about it. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. You still have to know the nuts and bolts at some level, and I'll go into that a bit further as well. Not creating controversy and detaching from claims of any kind. Right? So if you're getting asked the question, are you guilty or not guilty? And you might say, well, do I have to answer that? Do you really need to know? Or something like that. It's quite detailed. Yeah, you don't go into silence either. Because when silence is acquiescence, you're agreeing. Right? Now, another very powerful means of getting educated lawfully, legally, is the Know Your Rights material. And I've done most of the courses with Know Your Rights. So who knows Know Your Rights? Yeah, just a few, right? There's a radio show every Tuesday night, and it's pretty powerful. They've made nearly 200 radio shows. You can actually download the first 10 for free, and one of them is, well, there's the first 4. Why personal tax is actually voluntary. You don't have to pay tax, but if you don't, they're going to screw you over at this stage. The speeding fine stuff is, it's this one, Aussie speeding fines. It's a great training aspect, how to deal with parking fines, speeding fines. I'm not saying be unlawful about it. Don't, you still need to respect parking signs and speed limits and things like that, and red lights, but sometimes they go too far and the fines are quite high, and it's a revenue raising exercise. It's not about safety. Right? No. If you ever get to one of the seminars, you'll see a very powerful presentation on that. And for the Know Your Rights information, actually I'll show you the manuals. Right? You only got 5 minutes. Yeah, there's the Know Your Rights manual. It's more powerful than going to a lawyer, as far as I'm concerned. Aussie speeding fines, and there's the manuals for the introductory, the intermediate and advanced workshops. And there is one coming up on the 26th, 27th and 29th of July. The Friday evening is free. Right? If you want to come to the Saturday and Sunday, think about that. I'm going to have to rush through a few more. Yeah, I got this comment the other day. I don't think humanity realised that once the genie is let out of the bottle, and we're talking about 5G here, there is no way to put him back. We still need to hit critical mass for consciousness to wake up. And going a little bit further than that, a lot of the stuff that we've done, even before Magpie House, we were running study groups at home in the year 2000. That was a great experience. And we've done study groups in Magpie House based on the Conversations with God material. And what do I have to say about that? Ah, yes, there's a quote. Who's familiar with Conversations with God? Yeah. Oh, just a few. Yeah. This is fantastic material. They were published in the 1990s, and to the author's surprise, he was woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he wrote another book. This is only 2 years ago. And this is what this book is, the Awaken the Species. Right? And the author, Neil Donald Walsh, said to what he was communicating with, right? He said, why are you coming to us now? I thought you didn't have an agenda. We've got free will. We can do what we like. And the entity calling itself God answered, well, actually, you're coming to me because there's enough of you on the planet which is sane we're in a real mess. We need help. And that's so true, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
A quote from that particular book from 2017 is, this is the author speaking, if we do not awaken now during this early stage of our cosmic development, because we are a very young race, we've had a lot of suffering up until now, we could wind up living in this lifeline essentially as many older species in the physical realm do, becoming more and more violent even as we become more and more advanced. Now the God entity replied, those last 13 words are a description of how things are going on your planet right now. Right, so that's becoming more and more violent as we become more and more advanced. To describe the scenario so terrible, if we make the choice to go to artificial intelligence, it's devoid of humanity. It's got a social credit system that's already operating and coming this way. It automatically restricts our movements, our careers and bank accounts if we are algorithmically considered undesirable. Algorithmic is a machine thing. It's not a human thing. It's got no emotion behind it. And that's of course with facial recognition in almost any location or crowd. There's no escape. We don't have to make that choice. If there's enough of us with enough momentum to generate that critical mass, which doesn't have to be 50%, we can get somewhere. Right? There's worldwide movements on this right now. The choice for AI would actually set us back maybe hundreds or tens of thousands of years of more unnecessary suffering. If we don't wake up now. It's actually the perfect time to awaken, according to this material. Until we finally realise we collectively made the wrong decision and would like to reconsider. If you want to know more about the 25,000 galactic cycle and how we come through it, you could possibly watch 2012 Crossing Over. It's a movie that was made mostly at Magpie House, and I've got a 5-minute contribution as well as part of that. And it was so good that he was offered the filmmaker was offered a Hollywood contract. He turned it down because he wanted to get it to the world, put it on YouTube. It's had millions of hits, right? So it's really powerful.
Hey George, we're running a little bit late on time. Can we
Okay,
get back to
I'll wrap it up.
specific to open the door for...
Unfortunately, I did want to cover the Molino letter. Has anybody seen the Molino letter? Richard wrote to James Molino, and Molino replied with what I'd call absolute nonsense, but it was a standard letter. It was almost identical to what I was seeing 5 years ago. And so I wrote a letter in a reply. I managed to... I was given a hint that Rapunzel had put a disclaimer on their website, and that makes everything they do defunct, because they're saying it's for information and educational purposes only. And so the letter says, all you've written in your letter must be your personal opinion, therefore you are personally liable. Now, it is a very soft letter. If you want to send it, it would be appreciated to Molino. And if you can take a paper copy to his office, that would be appreciated too. And then if you get a reply, get it back to us so we can do something with it. The next stage, if necessary, is to produce a notice of liability. And that's part of what we are looking at, studying and doing. Now, what else can I finish with? Very quickly. There's the deleted Molino stuff. There's a far more radical solution to all this stuff if you really want to fight it. I'm not sure, I just want to go bush, I think. And for example, taxation is a manipulated material creation, spiritually immoral, and a poor excuse for leadership and management. That comes from the Telos information as well. And we don't need tax. Sorry. I'm finishing now. Yeah.
Thank you, George. Thank you. We're just trying to not rush it up, but to keep it on time. I'm back into topic, which is the 5G. So I just want to invite everyone, Richard and Bronwyn, and also George, to be here and then to answer your questions.